lesson, so it gives you an idea of how a Montessori teacher teaches any lesson. And more specifically, this is when she's teaching about the seerah, and I hope it works. Bismillah. Okay, I think the sound's coming from my computer and not the TV.
Today, I'm going to tell you.
Can y'all hear this? Okay.
Our first seerah story. Okay, it's the first story that we're going to have of a series of stories about the seerah. Does anyone know what seerah means? What does seerah mean? What is seerah about? Do you know what seerah means? No? Okay, it's special stories. Stories about the most amazing human being that ever lived. Stories about the most incredible man ever. Do you know who that is? Who's the most amazing man, the most incredible man ever? Yes, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. So seerah stories are stories about the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. And it's very important that we learn the seerah. You know why? Because if we learn about the life of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, then we can love him more and more because we know him more, right? And we can learn so many important lessons. If we listen to the seerah, we know the seerah, the life of the Prophet Muhammad, we can learn so many lessons for us so that we can become better people and then we can become like the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Right? Do you want to become like the Prophet? He was the most greatest person that ever lived. Do you want to become like that? Everything about the Prophet was perfect. His character was perfect. His way that he interacted with people was perfect. The way he ate, everything that he did was perfect. So when we do the seerah stories and we learn about the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, then we will learn the most perfect way that we can be, right? So that's why seerah stories are so important. And today's story is the first seerah story. And we're going to start right back. We're going to talk about not the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, but we're going to talk about his great grandfather. Does anybody know who the great grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam is? Do you know? Give them one time. Do you know? Sophia, you know because you've done this, right? Who's the great grandfather of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Who is it? That's right, Nabi Ibrahim. Prophet Ibrahim was one of the great grandfathers of the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. So we're going to start our seerah stories by talking first about the.
I thought she just does, mashallah, she's a trainer of Montessori teachers, so you can just see her style, right? But it is exactly how a Montessori lesson goes, where you'll notice her facial expressions. You notice like she's trying to spark interest, trying to spark joy, connect with the children. It's usually about this size of a group when introducing a new topic to children. It's about 3 children or so, sometimes one-on-one. And she's about to start using what's in front of her to act out the story. So it's always hands-on and sparked with interest. And you'll notice it was really funny. It seems like one of the girls had done this before and was so eager, and she just very politely just kind of told her to wait and then give her a chance. All right. So a little bit on our approach to developing school culture. What do we do about discipline? What does that look like? So our approach is really emphasizing what I call a rahmah-centered approach. What would it look like if we really tried to connect with our children, connect with one another through this lens of rahmah? So thinking about that we're trying to develop in ourselves and with the children a deep connection to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, to ourselves, to others, and the environment, that it's all built in that love and worship. We try to center the prophetic example, and how he treated children. The Anas ibn Malik said, radiallahu anh, said that he was a small child with the Prophet ﷺ, and he said he never said uff to him in the 10 years that he served him, right? And uff is the Arabic expression of annoyance and irritation. He never, said, why did you do that, right? So this is the example that we try to set for our children, that we want to respect ourselves individually and collectively. We also, these are some more trade terminology. We try to use restorative and reflective practices, meaning if there's a disagreement in the classroom, we support the children in working through that, right? We don't punish children. We try to come to a resolution based on what's happening. So if a child needs support, that we look at behavior as a means of communication. If there's a certain behavior that's challenging or problematic for the classroom, then we work with that child to get to a place where they can function better in the classroom. If there needs to be reconciliation, then we teach the children how to make amends for things that they've done that have been harmful to others, right? And there's a Montessori, this is built in. There's a book out on one of the tables. It's called Peace Rose, if you want to take a look. It's the traditional Montessori way of conflict resolution, in which children pass a rose back and forth, making their I statements until they come to a resolution. We always want to lead with curiosity towards children rather than judging them for behavior. We always want to see, well, what's underneath the behavior? What might be happening? Are they hungry? Are they tired? Are they having something else going on in their life? Are they needing to learn a skill that they don't have yet? So leading with curiosity. All of our teachers are very developmentally trained and can understand what are the sensory, developmental, emotional, physical needs underneath. And we lead with the belief that everyone's doing the best they can in any moment with what they know. And so we try to support children in finding better tools if sometimes the tools that they have don't work. We always want to keep the long view. So also in the lobby, I would really love if folks can contribute. We have a community art project, a vision board of what is it that we want for our children? What do we want them to, who do we want them to be when they get to be adulthood, right? What are those qualities that we want to instill in them? And so we try to keep that in mind. How am I going to support this child in getting there if they're not there yet? Because they probably won't be there yet. And we do have limits, right? The environment is there's a very particular way that the environment is set up. There's things that are supportive for the community and things that are harmful to the community. But we hold those limits with support, with guidance, with respect and love at all times. So a sample elementary daily schedule, as we get closer to the school year, we'll tweak this to exactly what it would look like. So drop-off could begin, for example, at around 8:15, where kids might be playing outside. We start bringing them in at around 8:30, and then we start with morning circle. I mentioned earlier, like dua, maybe have the kids do sharing songs, Quran recitation, read a story together. And then they each bring their clipboards with an agenda for the day, and they work with their teacher to plan out what are the work lessons that they're going to work through that day. Then we start a 3-hour morning work cycle, and that's kind of the pictures that we showed earlier, that they'll have work that they're already doing. They'll get invited to lessons, maybe not every day, but sometimes some days of the week they'll get invited to learn new things and then have follow-up work to do that. They can also, kids can eat when they're hungry, so they can bring their snacks, and when they need to eat their snack, they can sit at the table and eat snack, all within this morning work cycle. Then we have about 45 minutes for lunch and recess, the Dhuhr prayer together. Coming back from that, we do group reading or story time, and then we start another hour and a half work cycle. And a few days a week, this would be the time if we wanted to do like a school enrichment, like teach the kids coding or an art, or, an extra art activity, or, maybe something else that's more, not necessarily Montessori based, but like an extra enrichment that we want to bring into the program. Then towards the end of the day, we leave about 25 minutes for closing routines. The kids all make sure the classroom is set up for the next day. They clean everything themselves. They care for the plants. They dust. They sweep. They do all the things to prepare the environment for the following school day. And then we have a closing circle and then dismissal. So this is kind of a snapshot of what a typical day would look like. A few other things. So one of our goals with Medina Academy is to develop an intentional community. We would really love for this to be a collection of people who want the same things for their children. Right, so we do have a mandatory parent orientation where we go over our philosophy, how we approach discipline, how we encourage parents to reflect that back at home as well, and then voluntary ongoing parenting workshops. Like I said, I'm a certified parent educator in several models, and would love to encourage parents to help to join with us in learning those techniques and how to create homes that are rahma centered. Based on current neurobiology, as well as psychological well-being for children. Inshallah, we don't have the timings exactly yet, but we will have regular communication in addition to transparent classroom, having conferences every once in a while to meet face-to-face with the teacher to kind of see how the kids are doing. Also, we try to encourage respect for ourselves and our environment. So we want to honor healthy foods, encourage people to bring healthy foods to school. We will be a candy-free zone. And then also in Montessori, we kind of are really strong about not having commercial merchandise brought into the classroom to try to keep advertising out. So we would invite folks not to bring in like the latest Disney stuff or whatever else, superhero paraphernalia into the classroom, because it just distracts from the individual growth of children. So we welcome folks to bring any sort of stuff that's not commercial if possible. As Brittany mentioned, there's no homework, right? So just to kind of wanted to emphasize that again, the reason for that is because when a child is learning it with the Montessori methodology in the beginning, they don't really need homework because they're learning it hands-on in the beginning. So they're doing it with such intentionality that they learn it much better, more quickly, so that repetition, the busy work that comes home is unnecessary. So we encourage that families play, read, explore. It's time for creativity, it's time for family and friends, participating in home life, and doing anything else out there in the world, martial arts or extra art classes, or coming back to Quran Academy, or whatever else can be built into the day after school. And we're going to be continuing to try to develop more and more ways for our community to come together. So it was in my bio, but I didn't mention it. So years back, I used to run a weekend with Amy. We used to run a weekend program for kids called Explore Islam, and it was our take on a Montessori-inspired Islamic weekend program. And I think one of the things that was really filling about it is we developed an intentional community where we wanted to spend time together. We would do field trips together. We would try to find ways for our community of families to be together as much as possible. So a little bit more details. Again, we have mixed age classrooms, meaning so that we're starting with kindergarten, first and second in one classroom, with Brittany as our teacher. And inshallah, we're looking to hire more teachers. So either the first year we'll either have a second teacher or a teaching assistant, but we will have 2 adults, inshallah, in the classroom with up to 25 students in our class. So our first year, our enrollment will be 25 unless we somehow figure out like there's super interest and we have all the stuffing and all the space and can do multiple classrooms, Allahu Alam. But that's our intention right now, is just have one classroom with 25 children, two adults. And our intention is to add a grade every year. So starting with K through second and then adding third, fourth, and fifth until the Montessori curriculum, elementary curriculum goes up through 6th grade. So we can make a decision point at that time whether we want to add a 6th grade or stop at 5th. So we're going to be starting in the masjid basement room, and we have a diagram of that. And then inshallah, in the meantime, we'll be building the school next door in the property that we bought last year, assuming that might take about 2 years. So we're planning to start in the existing masjid facility for the time being. Do you want to talk about this?
Sure. So this is our working diagram of what the school or what the classroom will look like. Everything is situated so that the materials and what the child needs to learn for that activity is in that area. It's easily accessible. Another thing that's nice about this as well is that There are visual boundaries that are created with the existing structures, so using bookshelves, bookcases, mats, rugs, tables. And then that also goes into the flex seating that I mentioned earlier, where you have things like cushions or bean bags or like wiggle seats or just the rug itself. And then I just have on here a few examples of what a Montessori classroom typically looks like. Inshallah, we'll have something that reflects this in some way. I think that's it for this one. But yeah, everything is pretty much centered around those spaces. One thing that I think a lot of Montessori classrooms don't have are the calming spaces. So this is an area where a child can usually go to when they are feeling dysregulated, where they have those materials and tools easily accessible to them to help them to better regulate their bodies so that they can better learn the concepts and also help with executive functioning as a whole.
As I mentioned, we are hiring, so if anyone knows of anyone or anyone here is interested, just please reach out. There's our email. Let's see. So next steps. So we have QR codes on the doors and then at the table outside to submit an interest form for the school. So that would be the first step, is you submit a Google form that you're interested, and then we schedule an enrollment meeting because we just want to make sure that all of this makes sense to you. You know what a Montessori classroom is about. You know what to expect. If you have any questions, you're able to ask us. And we go through all of the details, the expectations, and then if you're ready to enroll, you complete a registration form with the registration fee. And then we have rolling start week of August 18th. So rolling start, what that means, we're a brand new school. And so all of our children, we're guessing, will be new to the curriculum, new to Montessori. And so we're planning on having kids have different start dates that week. So starting with the oldest children on Monday, for example. So let's say we have an even split of 8 second graders, 8 first graders, and 8 kindergartners. On Monday, the second graders will start. We'll introduce them to the environment, introduce them to some lessons so they have some things they can work on. Then maybe Wednesday, we have the first graders start. Same. So now the second graders are kind of in motion. They know what to do. They can welcome the first graders to come in, and then kindergartners maybe Friday. So depending on how the age breakdown is of enrollment, but we'll have a rolling start that week. So then that way kids can get used to the system. All right. So I thought you guys might want to hear from kids who have gone through Montessori to know, well, does this actually work? What is this about? So I'm going to invite both Bilal and Bushra to come up, and they can share a little bit about their time in Montessori. Over here. What's the start? Bushra wants to start?
This is very fun. Alright. Assalamu alaikum. So I'm Bushra. I go to LA Harbor College. I'm currently studying psychology and plan to become a speech pathologist, inshallah. I've been to Montessori school. I remember was first grade, and it was very comfortable environment. Can you hear me? There weren't a lot of students, so it was like a lot of one-on-one. That's a lot better. They're very small settings, so like learning was a lot more comfortable. Whereas after I went to traditional public schools, and it was just like you just sat there and would listen to the teacher. There wasn't a lot of wiggle room. It wasn't very comfortable. I was a very active child, so sitting down for me was very difficult. I would like to move around a lot, and listening to the teacher there was just very boring for me. So Montessori school for me was a lot better growing up.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Bilal. This is my mom. Uh, so I've had a lot of opportunities at different schooling systems throughout the years. I did some preschool in Pakistan for 6 months. I've gone to public school, Islamic school, and homeschooling, and then Montessori school from 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade. So I gotta say, I think Montessori was the best way to go. Unfortunately, it didn't continue all the way throughout my education. But the main thing I think that was really beneficial about Montessori was the emphasis on critical thinking and learning how to think. Right? A lot of times we think about, or we hear, think outside the box, but that's because we're put in a box in the first place, right? So when you're in elementary school, if you're not taught to think in a box, you have the opportunity as a young child to have creative experiences and to learn what you actually want to learn. It's not all about like learning the multiplication tables, which you will do, but it's like, hey, I really want to learn about the classification of different species in zoology. You can go into that rather than being the teacher being like, okay, that's a lesson for when you're in 4th or 5th grade. I think the other benefit is that because you have a lot of ages in the school system or in the school, you have older kids who are, when still young ages, learning how to be mentors for the younger kids, which is not something you'll necessarily see in other school systems. And then you have the younger kid. What? Oh, yes, that's me. And then as the younger kids learning in real time what an older kid, an older Muslim child looks like. So they're able to experience that in real time without having to wait until they go out elsewhere to figure that kind of stuff out. I think. Oh yeah, so I graduated 2023 from UC Berkeley with a degree, a bachelor's in business administration. I now work full-time, alhamdulillah, as an auditor in an accounting firm. Our office is in El Segundo. And then, yeah, so this is my main masjid, so I try to come here as often as possible. So having something like this, inshallah, is not only beneficial for you guys, but inshallah for our future generations as well. Because without this, I don't know how many of us are going to stick around, to be honest. So yeah.
So it's questions time. So we can ask any of us, anyone have any questions about our school or our program, or questions for our Montessori alumni kids, feel free to ask.
Like they're just learning the alphabet, and then later there's like someone at a 3rd or 4th grade reading level. How do you, because that sounds very overwhelming for one teacher. So I don't know, I was just wondering, like, is there standardized ways to make sure that the kindergartner meets the, like when they go to the next grade, are they improving, or is it all just like this curriculum over the next 2-3 years?
So one of the important parts of having a multi-grade level classroom is something called differential instruction. So you're differentiating instruction based off of one subject. But with Montessori, it is going to be individual to each child. So if you have a kindergarten student who is still working on trying to acquire the letter sounds, and then you have a 1st grader who is reading at typical 1st grade level, they're going to be able to work on those individual areas. Once the kindergarten student is able to understand the basic parts of language, of sound for the alphabet, then that child can then progress on and even go into that 1st grade level. I think a lot of times children, and for example, my child right now is in kindergarten in a public school system, and she is kind of stuck in this place where she's already learned her letter sounds. She has already passed the area where she needs to be for kindergarten. She's kind of just hanging out. She's not really growing in that academic area. And so at home, I have to continue to help her expand that knowledge based off of her interests. So we have to just dive right into the first grade work. Within the Montessori classroom, that work is available. It's not something that the child has to just kind of like sit around, or the parent has to, write an email to the teacher, hey, my child is kind of bored. Can we do something about this? The child has access to the material. And on top of that, the teachers are going to be constantly observing, constantly monitoring, keeping that data in front of them so they can say, okay, this child has progressed past this first stage. It's time for us to move on to the next stage.
So the Montessori classroom is very different, right? So let's say we're starting with circle time. We're just doing this basic song, and greetings and things. And then every child then starts their work, so they can go to whatever area of the classroom that they want. So there's not like one subject at a time. They can do whatever. So they go to, some kids will be working on math, some kids will be working on language arts, some kids will be working on science, all at the same time.
But there's a plan. It's not like, everyone just go off and do whatever you want. There is a plan in place. The teacher meets with each child or with a small group of children, and they physically write down those plans. So they can make a visual schedule. So just as you would schedule out your day of meetings or work, the child would work with the teacher to schedule out their lessons for the day. And then the teacher would also give input, okay, we've mastered this, then I'm going to pull you into a small group so that we can continue on to the next lesson.
So as an example, on one of our tables, we have sandpaper letters, which is a very traditional Montessori first look at letters. So a kid traces with their finger the letters, right? So let's say a kindergartner has been working on a group of 3 letters, and it seems like, oh, they kind of mastered it. I see that they can trace it, in the way that it would be written. So then I might invite them to start writing. I would let's say it's that work time. They're doing the sandpaper letters, but I notice, oh, I think they're ready for the next thing. Then I will pull them to do a one-on-one lesson with me and introduce them to the next step, right? So then it's according to their schedule, they get to learn the next thing. And let's say that there's another learner who's already reading, then they don't need to be on sandpaper letters. They can be reading a book, or they can be doing a grammar lesson, whatever is appropriate for where they are. So I guess the difference than a traditional classroom where it's one subject at a time for the whole classroom. In a Montessori classroom, everyone's working on anything at any time, right, with guidance. So we after circle time is each child brings the agenda, as Brittany was mentioning. We make sure that what they're going to be working on for the day, and just depending on what they want to start with, what materials are available, depending on what other kids are working on, right, then they make those plans. Yeah, please.
No, that's a critical subject and a critical skill. And again, we are constantly monitoring. So we do have those milestones. We do have those Common Core standards. And just looking at the Common Core standards, you can kind of say, okay, this is what is expected for a kindergarten student at the end of the year or the middle of the year. This is what's expected for first and second grade. So if that's something that is concerning you, you can definitely refer back to that. And I I don't know if we printed those out, but if you want to reach out to us, we can forward that information to you so you have a good idea of where your child is or where they should be during those periods of time. But yes, we are constantly monitoring. You can, on the app, have access to that progress to see what they're on or maybe what they need to work a little bit more on in the classroom. But it's constant monitoring, constantly assessing through a variety of ways, not just through standardized tests. One of the things that I do with my older child, I quite frequently, when she's doing her homework, especially math, I ask her, how did you get this answer? I don't tell her it's right. I don't tell her it's wrong. I ask her to go through each step, and she's able to walk me through it, and that tells me, okay, she has this concept down. It's time for us to apply it in a different way, or it's time for us to progress on. And we do the same thing in the Montessori classroom. How did you get this work? Why did you get this answer? Can you explain it to me? A lot of times I like to be a little silly in the classroom, and I'll tell the kid, pretend I'm an alien. I don't know what this is. Can you explain this to me? And they're able to walk me through these places. If I see that they're having an issue or they're stumbling over, that's when we're able to jump in and scaffold the learning process with them, and then slowly take away those areas until they're independent and they can fully explain it on their own.
Yeah, and just to add, so that's one of the reasons we chose Transparent Classroom as our curriculum platform, is because it automatically draws the parallel or crosswalks from Montessori to standardized curriculum, so that we always know where the kid is in the Montessori curriculum, they are in state standards at the same time. What other questions do we have?
Yeah, so I went to Montessori school for 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade, and then transferred to public school in 6th grade. So I think it was definitely some getting used to, but I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. I thought it was interesting. Like in one of my math classes in 6th grade, we took at the beginning they do a standardized test to see like a placement test. I found out, my teacher told me at the end of the year, like, hey, what happened during the year when you took that test? You did like very, very poorly, like really bad in that test. And at the end of the year, you had one of the highest grades in the class. So that was a thing where it's just like that skill I was lacking in test taking, which is, I think, a skill that's fairly easy to learn. Which unfortunately, I think my Montessori school didn't do a good job of that. But I know they've talked about if there are concerns of transferring before you leave or you want to leave, that will be taught. Like test taking is a skill, which I think is a lot easier to learn than how to think, right? So that's kind of something you kind of learn towards the end of it, or like you can pick up, hey, here's exam, these are some exam tricks you can learn, stuff like that. So it was definitely an adjustment, but it wasn't something that like was kind of like a make or break.
Yeah, let me just add to that too. So one of our thoughts is that as soon as a parent or a family knows that they will be transitioning to another school system, that gives us enough time to prep that child for the transition. So like teaching them how to take a test, right? Because, and as Bilal said, we approach it as a life skill, not a judgment of good or bad, right? Or so it's, how do you develop this life skill? So maybe start them some homework so they're used to that, right? So starting that transition process when we know that a kid is going to be transitioning to another system.
So transitioning for me, it was a little bit difficult. I needed some assistance with like English and math and other subjects. So they would take me inside and do some one-on-one, because learning new material was like 30 students in one classroom for just one teacher, and it was like very difficult for me to retain the information.
Oh, okay. Yes.
Thank you. This is excellent. I'm very excited to hear all of these. Having worked myself with the school systems, private like Chadwick, Lycée Français, public schools in Palos Verdes, I can conclude now that Montessori school system is very good. That gives the children self-esteem, and it gives them security, and which is good for their future, other part of education. But I've also noticed that for the past decade or so, China has that kind of a, I don't know if they call it Montessori or not, but it is focused and centered on child learning in the cosmos. And of course, if you're familiar with Finland, they are approaching that way to teach the children. My question after this comment is, do we have a role model here in Los Angeles County that have acquired Montessori system in the masjid, in the Islamic Center? Do we have one?
Okay.
And the other question was, this is going to be open to public or strictly to community of Muslim family?
Yeah, so it's unfortunately the Montessori methodology is not that common. So we're hoping to be some of the trailblazers to show that education could be different, and Islamic education can be amazing. And so we're hoping to be, one of the forerunners of that. We've actually been in contact with another Muslim Montessori teacher who has a school out in Fontana. So that's, one of our contacts. I think there is another Montessori school in like the Valley area. And so, I'm thinking about visiting them, inshallah, as well. But there's not very many, unfortunately. So, inshallah, we can be one of the first. And then the second question was, I mean, anyone is welcome, and we will be, as long as they're willing to learn an Islamic curriculum, right? As I mentioned, our school is very Muslim, right? And everything will be taught with Bismillah. Everything will taught with isn't Allah amazing in math, in science, in language arts, in history. So it's if someone is open to that, Bismillah. But our focus is on developing the souls of Muslim children. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, so typically, we would have circle time. The kids would go grab their agenda clipboards and maybe come back to circle and just wait for their turn. The agenda setting just takes like a minute for each child. And some of the older students, we do even weekly agenda setting. So some of the older children might already know what to do and they can just, go start. And the younger children, it's more, we'd have to do the daily agenda setting. And again, that's why we want to start with that rolling start date. So then that way we'll have some kids who already kind of know the rhythm and know what they can do, so they can get started more quickly. Yeah. Any other questions? Yeah. Yeah, so that's a Monday through Friday schedule. Because of the way the Montessori curriculum is set up, let's say someone wanted to pick their kid up for Jumu'ah and wanted a half day Friday, that's potentially possible, right? There's flexibility because they wouldn't be necessarily missing anything except more work time. So they would be missing an hour and a half of work cycle, but so there is a little bit of flexibility with that. Yeah, so typically it's around that in a Montessori classroom. Yeah.
my understanding is in a Montessori classroom, it's usually 1 to 30 or up to 36 students per teacher. But in our situation, we're hoping to have that additional adult in the room so that it would be much lower, would be around 1 to 12, 1 to 13.
Yeah, my kids went to a very small Montessori, so I forgot that was the stat. The school we went to was a similar ratio. Yeah. Yes, so within the Montessori system, grades are really loose. Like we move kids to grades because that's what the outside system does. But within the Montessori classroom, grades don't really have meaning. It's more the curriculum. You move through the curriculum, however long it takes. So you could be in second grade and like already doing something that a fourth grader might typically do, or you might be really struggling with your language development and you're still in a kindergarten area because that's where you are developmentally. So um, so typically, kids who graduate from the Montessori system tend to be pretty advanced because there's so much individualized learning. So one of our community members here, she does a Montessori homeschool, and I know homeschooling is a different environment, but she said she was telling me a while back that she had her daughters take state testing just to see, and one was like 2 grades ahead and one was like 3 or 4 grades ahead just because of having done the Montessori system. So typically that's kind of what would happen. So by the time that a kid would exit our program, they would typically be at least on par with where they would be in an outside school. Some of the subject matter is different though, right? We're teaching creation of the universe, right? Not necessarily California. So there is going to be some growing pains and shifting between curriculums because our focus is different. So some subjects won't be quite the same. Did I answer it enough? Okay. So I like the word invitation versus expectation, right? So the invitation is to spark learning wherever you find it at home. So it doesn't have to be paralleling what they're doing in school necessarily, but it could be. So if you know they're doing a zoology project, I want to say go to the zoo, but I have an issue with caged animals. Like I'm trying to think, maybe go to the marsh, right? Like if they're learning about birds in the classroom, oh yeah, come to my mom's house. She has a barn with horses and chickens and goats. No more goats. So we can do a field trip to the Mirza residence. Yeah, but it's so there could be those parallels. You're welcome to take what they're learning and spark do study outside, or it could be something totally different. It could just be finding ways to explore, to learn, just to develop, to follow I guess what would be like very Montessori is to notice what your kids are curious about, what they're interested in, and like going with that. So if they love to cook, then it's supporting them in cooking at home and measuring things and learning that. Or if they, riding bikes is very good physically, but also motor skills, right? So you could expand on Montessori curriculum, but that's not the expectation. As Brittany said, school stays at school, and then at home, there's like endless possibilities. Yeah. I hope we covered everything. Tried to cover a lot. Yes. it was through those experiences that sparked my own like interest in Montessori. Seeing her kids go through the system, I was like, wow, I want to learn this. Alhamdulillah. Bushra's mom. Thank you so much. And I also just want to thank Rabia for her beautiful food presentation today. She's all homemade, handmade from her heart. And, you know, I was telling her it's just such a beautiful fit because in the Montessori and Islam, we always want to spark, you know, lead with ihsan, lead with beauty. And I feel such a good representation of that. Yes. Yes. There are Muslims all around the world, right? And Allah knows everything that's happening in the world. Isn't that amazing? Thank you so much for sharing. Alhamdulillah. And just one thing that Rabia mentioned that I also that also stuck with me is that in the Montessori environment that our kids went to, they went to the same school. There's no bullying, right? Because every child, like everyone knows how to like treats each other with love and respect. Sometimes there's arguments and we work through them. And that was just so amazing for me because I hadn't seen that in other environments. So I know it's about time for prayer soon. So any last questions, and then we can maybe enjoy some refreshments that were brought, alhamdulillah. And I guess just a note about what's outside. So we have a sample curriculum binders for language, arts, and math if you want to see that, with some sample language, arts, and math materials. We also have a framework of our Hadith Jibril Islamic Studies curriculum. Not all the lessons in there yet, but just the framework. And then we also have some of our core discipline/parenting philosophy books that we use. And we also have the community art project, which I mentioned. We'd love for some other folks to participate to the vision of what we want for our children. Last part. So if you're interested, you can contact us, our email, our school email. And then this you to the prospective student interest form. So again, this is the first step if you're interested in enrolling your children this coming school year. We have 25 spots. It's going to be first come, first serve, inshallah. And just a note, because it had come up before, September 1st is our cutoff date, so kids need to be 5 by September 1st to participate in this year's program, or they can for the next year's program, inshallah, if they're younger than that. Jazakumullah khair for attending. Okay. Thank you, Papa. All right. Thank you all for coming. Please enjoy yourselves and feel free to ask me, myself, or any of our youngsters any additional questions. Jazakumullah khair. Assalamu alaikum.